Hey everyone, welcome to the Gives in the Bank Recruiting Podcast brought to you by BuckeyeScoop.com. I am Marc Givler. We have Bill Greene back. Kevin and I were doing a few shows from San Antonio under the Gives and Bank umbrella, but we've got Bill back here today. A little bit technical difficulties, so he's on audio for us. And we got Kevin Noon here again as well. He's going to moderate, participate, produce, do what he does. So this is going to be kind of an interesting show for us. This is the reaction show to what is happening with the Ohio State defensive staff. As I think I've written a few times, Ryan Day took a flamethrower to it here earlier today. Let me see if I can recap this properly. Kerry Coombs out, Al Washington out, Tim Walton in as corners. And we're still waiting to kind of see the Parker Fleming fallout and kind of if there's going to be some fallout with Parker Fleming. Perry Eliano in from Cincinnati to coach safeties. He was corners coach at Cincinnati. So we've got two defensive coaches out. We've got two new hires already made. And with a to be determined, I think, on the Parker Fleming special teams role. There's a lot of rumors circulating about that. We may touch on that for a minute, but that's very much a lot of speculation there. There's not a lot of concrete info on that one yet, but we'll continue to work on that. Bill, your thoughts on today? Are you surprised by any of this? Let's start there. Are you surprised by any of this?
No, not surprised at all. Barnes was out. Barnes was told to look for something else, and he did, and he found something else. Good for him. It just didn't. The tea leaves didn't read that Kerry Coombs was going to be back. He's not been very active on social media, and the rumbling I got when they were out the Rose Bowl, like that was going to be his last rodeo. So no, not surprised at all by this. Now, the Al Washington thing is surprising because a recruit that committed recently told me that Ryan Day told him that Al Washington would be back. So this could be a new development there with Al, that maybe he was offered some sort of a different position within the staff, and through his choice, he's decided to not accept it. So, because I do think that as of maybe January 1, I think Al Washington was going to be back. So that is the surprising thing to me, not Combs, Barnes being out. No surprise there at all.
Yeah, I agree on Washington, and what I have been hearing the last, I would say maybe a week, maybe a little less than a week, is that, they're going to have first of all, I think it was decided that Larry Johnson was returning. I think that was the first domino that fell, that he was not going to retire or be told to move on. Once that happened, it sounds like, Jim Knowles is going to coach the linebackers. And I think once all that was decided, I think they want to have a succession plan in for Larry Johnson, who may very well retire after next season. This could be his last season coming up. But he certainly doesn't have, several years left. We're winding, toward retirement here. I think they want a succession plan in place for recruiting purposes, especially. And what I was told was that Al Washington was essentially given an opportunity to move down to defensive line this year, work with Larry Johnson for a year or two, whatever it was going to be. And, that he kind of balked at that. And at that point, it was kind of addressed that, this wasn't really a request. It was kind of like, this is what we're doing. And so there were obviously some differing opinions on that. And now Al Washington is not returning. So that's what I have on that. On Combs, this one was I don't want to say it was surprising to me. I kind of posted the other day. I said, nothing's going to surprise me with this stuff. There are so many different balls in the air at this point a few days ago. But I don't think Combs was fired in the way we think of it. I don't think he was told like back in December that this was it. He's going to coach the Rose Bowl and they're going to replace him. I think he was kind of given a choice here of, okay, you're not going to be the DC, stick around, coach the corners, whatever. And I think similarly to Al Washington, I think he was kind of balking at that. And I think it got to a point this week where I think Ryan Day just said, well, I'm going to make these decisions. So you guys have, there's been balking. There's been, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to be here. I think Ryan Day kind of stepped in and said, well, choices now made. This is the direction I'm going. And that's what we saw this morning. That is my intel on this, kind of my read on it. It was very odd to me continually hearing throughout December and even into the first few days of January that Kerry Coombs had an opportunity to stay at Ohio State and that it wasn't already announced. The fact that we just kept going and nothing was announced was very odd to me. And I think the way this worked out makes sense because the Eliano thing, I was told today that he actually interviewed last week. That was kept pretty much under wraps, I think. I don't know if anyone even had that, but he interviewed last week. That was the Matt Barnes. That wasn't the Kerry Coombs replacement. That was the Matt Barnes replacement. And then all of a sudden, Tim Walton kind of emerges. And that is really your Combs replacement. So it was fascinating to me how this worked out. We'll go into a little more of this, but I kind of asked you about your reaction, Bill. But do you think this was okay? So we talked about are you surprised, whatever. Bill, was this the right decision? Were these the right decisions by Ryan Day?
I think so. I think what we saw, I can't believe that I couldn't believe he brought Kerry Coombs back after the Alabama game. I mean, that was as bad of a coaching job as I've ever seen in doing this for 20 years. I mean, that was a joke, that defensive plan. And I was stunned that they brought him back. I thought at the time that he was either going to get fired or he was going to be reassigned. I kind of thought what would happen after Alabama is what happened after Oregon. Ryan Day stayed with Combs into the 2021 season, and that lasted, 8 quarters, and that party was over. So I think Ryan waited too long there. I think that had to have been done after Bama. And then, Matt Barnes was put in a tough spot, but he's not, he's not defensive coordinator material at Ohio State. Go to Memphis, learn, get better. And, but so I think it had to be done. The secondary was just not good enough, not good enough. And this had to be done. And I think, we haven't even talked about, the O-line move. And I think Ryan Day, I think he looked at where this team was after the Michigan game. I think the Michigan game was a real seminal moment for him. That was a butt kicking. That was not a fluke. That wasn't the Penn State game from 6 years ago where you control the game and they block a kick and run it in, but you were really the better team. That was not the case here. They were soundly beaten by a better team. The defensive plan was terrible in that game, and it was terrible most of the year. So I think Ryan Day looks at where this Ohio State team is right now. I think he's probably satisfied with the overall talent. The recruiting rankings bear that out. But I don't think he felt they were well coached enough individually at each spot. And I think that's why we're seeing all these changes. I don't think he feels the staff, as it was constructed prior to all these changes, was ready to help them take on Alabama and Clemson and Georgia and win playoff games. And I think the Michigan game was the final straw for a lot of these guys that we need to make drastic changes and not just make tweaks.
Yeah, no question. That's when a lot, because up until that point, and the schedule was soft. So
Yeah.
I'm not claiming that everything was fine up to that point, but up to that point, they were improved. The Barnes came in a tough situation, and they were getting better results. Now, it certainly wasn't good enough. It wasn't national championship caliber by any stretch, but there was at least a little bit of improvement being shown. Things were kind of trending upwards, statistically, results wise. They hadn't lost any games. Then Michigan happens, and yeah, total reset. And they were out physical in both trenches in
Yeah.
that game.
Yeah.
Obviously, they were out physical up front. Their offensive line was out physical a lot this year. I know the numbers are good, but third and two felt like 3rd and 8 a lot of times this
Well,
year.
well, they
You
had to
know,
pass a lot. They threw the
yeah,
ball a lot on 3rd and 2 and 4th and 1, and that is not Ohio State football. And it wasn't Ohio State football under Ryan Day 2 years ago. That was a pretty physical team. Ryan Day's first year with Dobbins, of course you had Chase Young, but I mean, I think they've gotten softer and prettier and more Big 12-ish and more diva-ish with each year. And I think this is Ryan Day drawing a line in the sand that there needs to be drastic changes. And I think we're seeing drastic changes. And I agree with them. I agree with them. I don't think it's, lack of talent. The recruiting rankings show that Ohio State's top 5 every year in terms of overall talent. And the NFL draft will bear that out as well. So I just felt from a schematic point of view, quality of coaches, they weren't good enough. And I think Ryan realized that. And, this guy he's not scared to make moves, whether they're right or wrong. He's not scared. I'll tell you that.
yeah. I mean, he definitely came in and made some changes immediately when he got the job. And I know he had the kind of a come to Jesus meeting with Stud about O-line recruiting and things like that, in addition to some of the changes he made. And now what we're seeing today. So, and people are going to talk about the timing of this. Look, I think you kind of hit it on the head. If he was going to make a move prior to like now, it needed to happen pretty much immediately after the Alabama game. You can't do this. People were calling for heads to roll in September, and
It's too
that
late.
wasn't realistic. It's not realistic.
No,
You can't
no, those are band.
install. Yeah,
That was, Matt Barnes was a Band-Aid move. And just to try to somehow salvage the season after Oregon. But you can see now that Matt Barnes did get a DC job, but he got Memphis. He didn't get Oklahoma, didn't get USC, So Combs and Barnes as DCs, not good enough. Not good enough. And Ryan Day realized it. He acted on it.
Well, we saw a regression as the year went on. Before they moved Barnes over to that position, we were seeing them sub 4 or 5 guys in, trying to find the perfect personnel every time. Barnes comes in, they get away from it. What do we see again in the Rose Bowl? They're making wholesale hockey line changes again, 3, 4, 5 guys. So, for whatever reason, they regressed in terms of some of the things that they were trying to do. And, obviously coming off of the Michigan game and getting out toughed in that game, and Hassan Haskins rushing for 5 touchdowns. They didn't want to have TJ Pledger and Trevion Thomas doing that to them. And they couldn't get Cameron Rising, the Utah quarterback, down to the ground on that 4th and short play. And he ends up making a house call after 6 guys touch him and can't bring him down to the ground. It certainly showed that this defense was not going to get better under its current iteration, and these moves were absolutely necessary.
yeah. It just but this is why he waited until the end of the season. I know people wanted like immediate like gratification on this in September, but this is why he waited until after the season. You cannot get Jim Knowles at the end of September. You
No,
cannot.
no,
You
no.
can't get these guys. And what I said at the time, I had a source, kind of at Ohio State telling me they weren't going to make, I had multiple, but the one specifically telling me that they weren't, said, look, all the good coaches are coaching right now.
Sure.
There aren't a lot of good coaches on the couch right now waiting around for Ryan Day to call to come in the middle of the season and try and install a new defense. That's not how this works. So once he didn't make the move right after the Alabama game, he really had no other choice but to go through and try and piece this together the best he could with what he had.
Right.
You're still in the play. I mean, God, they were in the playoff. They were essentially one, because they weren't going to lose to Iowa. they were one win away from the playoffs. So, you can't punt on a potential playoff season. Hire a guy that you don't even know if it's the right fit. You don't even, how's he going to install the defense? So you wait, you do the best you can with what you got, and then you make your move after the season when you get some A-list guys. They don't get Perry Eliano does not leave Cincinnati at the end of September.
No.
He's coaching two Thorpe candidates. Cincinnati ultimately makes the playoff. He's going to give up on that. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah, no chance.
Well, what happens if Ohio State does beat Michigan and goes to the playoff and plays an SEC opponent close, loses the game? We'll just, let's not throw a win there, but they make a playoff. They're still sitting at an 11-2 season. Do you feel that you have the latitude to completely blow it up at that point, coming off of a playoff season? So sometimes things happen for a reason.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. I don't know what he would have done, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I think the Michigan game really was a big moment. And then if that wasn't the final straw, the first half of the Utah game had to have, that was the final straw if it hadn't been decided before that. I mean, so I think these moves had to be made, and we got all three of us, I think, had talked about it during the year that they just weren't well coached enough. They weren't well coached enough. And, you're going into when you have to throw a running back to play linebacker, and then you get to the end of the year and you got to throw your tight end in to play linebacker. And it's just, this doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen for a playoff championship team. And I think Ryan Day realized all of this, and I applaud the guy for the moves. Whether they're right or wrong, we don't know today. We're going to find out whether they were right or wrong, but you can't say this guy is scared. I mean, he ran a bunch of coaches when he first got the job. There was no hesitancy there. So, you're going to find out if these are right or wrong. But to me, the ultimate mistake was bringing Coombs back as DC after the Alabama game. I think realistically, these moves we're seeing today should have been made a year ago. I was stunned he brought Kerry Coombs back as DC after that Alabama clown show performance. So I think Ryan was a little late on the draw there. But like Mark said, once you cast your die, and this is my staff, well, once you play a game, once 2 days start, it's over. That's your staff.
When you sit there and you talk about doing it after 2020, but 2020 was 2020, and was that an anomaly? I mean, sometimes you feel that you have incomplete information at that point. Were we this because we didn't have practice? Were we this because we had to practice separately? And that, I mean, there was so much there that I think it was very hard for anybody to really have the clarity. And we have the hindsight now to look at this, the clarity in the moment to say, this is a legitimate structural issue that we're dealing with. The foundation of this house has got cracks in it, because it could have been very easy to just dismiss it and say, well, it's 2020, and that's what that situation was. So I think maybe that's something that played into the factor of not making moves coming off of a championship appearance, coming off of just such a weird, strange year. So, with the gift of hindsight, yeah, these moves should have been made there. But, I've spoken to a lot of fans over the course of the last 14 days, 30 days, coming off of the Michigan loss, coming off of the Rose Bowl, who are like, so help me God, if Ryan Day doesn't make some changes, I'm done, which they're never done. But he's made your changes, right. So you got it. So now let's see what comes from that, what fruit bears from that.
Yeah, I think the bottom line for me, just one guy's opinion, is, as of today, Ohio State is better positioned to contend in 2022 than they were yesterday or last week. I like all the moves. I think they were needed, and we're going to see now how well they're going to pan out, because the proof is always in your record. But I think Knowles, Eliano, Frye, Walton, totally think they're better positioned schematically than they were, when they walked off the field against Utah.
Yep, now, of course, it brings up the question about what does that mean for recruiting?
Yes, that's what. One thing I'm going to sneak in there. Kind of watch this here. See what's. I don't know what Kerry Coombs' next move is. I do know that when I was talking to Cincinnati sources this morning about Perry Eliano, that it was pretty much told to me that Combs is going to be their top. Now they've got an opening at Cincinnati for corners coach, and that Combs is going to
Sure.
be their top target. So
Totally makes sense. Totally makes
watch
sense.
for
I get
that.
it.
We'll see. I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen, but I know that's going to be Cincinnati's top target. So we'll see what other options Kerry has, and but could be circle of life there. could be getting
Yeah.
completed. All right, recruiting. Uh, gosh, let's start with let's start. Let's go. Let's just go in. Let's just go in order here. Justin Frye was the first domino here. Although I guess Jim Knowles was the first domino. So maybe we start there. Jim Knowles, you know, what can we expect out of him? What do you like, Bill? What do you expect out of Jim Knowles? I have my thoughts. I'm going to let you kind of go first on this and see if we're on the same page. But like, what do you expect out of him on the recruiting trail coming in? Because obviously his first mandate is to fix the defense.
Yeah, he was hired as a coach, strictly. Reminds me of when Urban brought in Chris Ash, who no one ever looked at Chris as this dynamic superstar recruiter. And I don't think Jim Knowles' history is that he is this superstar recruiter. He was brought in first and foremost to get this freaking defense coached by a legit DC that they haven't had since Jeff Hafley was here. So I think what you get out of him as a recruiter is a bonus. Whatever you get out of him is going to be fine. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're stacking 5-stars all over the field and they're confused, disoriented, poorly schemed up, you're dead. So I don't think Jim Knowles was brought here as a recruiter. I think he's brought here first and foremost as the defensive coordinator, and then what you get out of him as a recruiter is a bonus. I think he's okay. I don't think he's looked at as one of the greatest recruiters in college football. I don't think he's Heartline, but he doesn't have to be. He needs to get this defense fixed.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll, I think he'll give them something in Texas. I don't know that he's going to go in there and just dominate the state. He's going to need, he's going to need Brian Hartline's help in there. He's going to need some of these other guys to kind of the position coaches of the recruits to kind of go in there and carry some of the water as well. But he's well respected in Texas. He's from the Philly area, so they've been recruiting the Philly area pretty hard, really for a while. So I think he gives them a little bit there in the relationships department with high school coaches on the East Coast, which won't hurt. But yeah, I agree with you. I think I look at this as taking kind of what I think Knowles will be as a recruiter. Obviously, he's going to be the guy as the coach. He's going to design the defense. He's going to call the defense. It's going to be the buck is totally going to stop with him on that. As a recruiter, what I think they've done here is they've taken a good quarterback and they've surrounded, but maybe not, a Patrick Mahomes type of quarterback, but they've surrounded him with 5-star receivers, a 5-star offensive line, a 5-star running back, with the assistants now on this defensive staff who are all considered really good recruiters. I think Tim Walton, we'll get into Walton here in a minute. That might be one where he's got to kind of calibrate himself getting back into the college game. But Eliano's a big-time recruiter. Larry Johnson is a big-time recruiter. So he simply needs to, when kids are visiting, sit down with them and show them their path to the NFL, their path to development, their path to their role in the defense. And, let Larry Johnson do what Larry Johnson does. Let Perry Eliano do what Perry Eliano does as far as the relationships and, getting the kids to like them and things like that. Jim Knowles is there to just kind of maybe sell the vision of what that's going to look like on the field. So I think it's a pretty good setup. We'll see what happens. I certainly like the setup a lot more than maybe I did a few weeks ago when we had no idea who was doing what. So next up was Justin Frye. I know the results are a little skewed on this because Frye's been at Boston College and UCLA, and those aren't maybe places where you recruit 5-star offensive linemen, but I would be absolutely stunned if offensive line recruiting didn't improve. When will we see a tangible, measurable evidence of that? That could be tricky because a lot of their 23 targets right now are Ohio guys.
Yeah.
But I think we'll see what happens with someone like Peyton Kirkland from Florida. Even that one, I think they were off to a good start. It's kind of the childhood dream school, the dreaded childhood dream school. But I would be stunned if recruiting didn't improve. Bill, your take on what they've gained there on the recruiting front?
I like it only because, I was pretty consistent on Stud for the past 2 years. I thought we knew who he was. Dennis Greene would have told us he was who we thought he was. I thought he was an above average developer of what he had, but he was a below average recruiter. And I don't know how anyone could argue against that. If you would take a list of just the Ohio guys, these are people born inside the state of Ohio who probably couldn't wait to play for Ohio State. The guys he lost from Ohio, it's stunning and shocking. And I wrote the other day because I was on the inside of Nick Samac and JD Duplain's recruitment, and I saw how they lost those two guys. That was inexcusable, unacceptable. I mean, just never should have happened, and it was through lack of effort. So if Justin Frye just tries, which I have no reason to think he won't, then the recruiting will come up. And then he's going to have to develop them on the field. I mean, and I do think Stud put out above average O-lines. I thought he was an above average developer. And I never once ever called for him to be fired. But I think Ryan Day had enough of the recruiting. It looked, 6 months ago, you're talking Ernest Greene, just a lock. There was a time when Goodwin was looked at as a lock, and well, then you don't even get these guys. And in the end, these guys are looking around. You're not even being considered anymore. And then it's Ohio Project, and I think Ryan Day just had enough. So I think Justin Frye will be a better recruiter, but as always, man, the proof's in the pudding. So we'll see what he does on the field. If someone came to me and said, we're going to trade Stud and get Justin Frye, we need your approval. You have 5 minutes. Give us your decision. I would have said, do it. So I guess that's my bottom line there. I never would have fired Stud just to go look for willy-nilly, try to find a guy to replace him. But if you're telling me I can get Justin Frye, if you fire Stud, I would say do it.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about this in the past, but the strain that it puts on the head coach when your position coach is not kind of, carrying enough water on the recruiting trail. It's not a tenable situation. It can't continue indefinitely. The head coach cannot also be the de facto offensive line recruiter. He's got 800 things to worry about. And I said this about Ed Warner too, so I've been pretty consistent on this. I think there are, and trust me, we could dive into, we could do a whole episode on Stud versus Warner and stuff like that. They're very different. There's very different reasons why this was the case, but Ed was essentially a non-recruiter as well. And I'll say that in a way that, I'll try and condense this into 10, 15 seconds on how they're different. Is Ed's personality was pretty in your face, kind of, he can be abrasive. And so I think having him kind of tone it down a little bit and just, kind of be more friendly, more personable, I think was the challenge there. I don't think that was actually the problem with Stud. I think it was simply, you need to pick up the phone and call these kids. You need to return calls. You need to return texts. You need to build. I think if Stud was motivated there were certain recruitments where when he was motivated with it, I think he's perfectly capable of doing that. So I think one had kind of a personality issue and the other had kind of an effort issue. But
Yes.
what they had in what they had in common was it puts a ton of strain on your head coach and it puts a ton of strain on your regional recruiters. You got Tom Herman getting you Demetrius Knox. You got Mike Vrabel getting you Jamarco Jones. Larry Johnson, who like never ever helps out. Like Larry isn't, they call it Larry land. It is D-line, D-line, D-line. Larry Johnson's getting involved with Isaiah Prince to help Ed out. And when you keep doing that and you're putting strain on the rest of your staff and you're putting strain on your head coach, it eventually becomes too much and you have to make a change.
Well, they were able to
And you
go out and get
also,
Paris Johnson. They were able to go out of state and get Donovan Jackson, but they couldn't. I mean,
but
like his
it's,
job was to get Jackson Carman. His job,
yeah,
go get Jackson
right.
Carman and don't screw this up. And they don't get him. How they don't get
Well,
involved with Blake Miller, I don't understand that one either.
they tried. Yeah, they tried there. But, and Mark also forgot to mention that, yeah, you landed Nicholas Pettit Ferrer, and that was 1,000% Greg Schiano.
Right. Yeah, I was
1,000%.
going over the Warner guys just to kind of be, from a just to kind
Yeah.
of show how,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be fair here. Like they both put up, but yes, we can go through the stud stuff. Yeah, I mean, you've got you've got Nick Petit-Frere, you've got an endless list of guys where, I know
Oh,
like
you,
Tony Alford's been working the Peyton Kirkland thing. Like
yeah.
you can't it can't be that way indefinitely. You can patch things up, and even oh well, what about they got DeJuan Jones late? That was Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson laid the foundation on DeJuan Jones in Indianapolis. Like, that was Kevin Wilson knowing the
I saw
area,
it. I
getting
watched it. I watched him at
yeah,
the Best of the Midwest. That was
right,
Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson was there because his son was
right.
in that camp. And I watched Kevin Wilson with DeJuan Jones there. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, for me, bottom line, do you trade Frye for stud? Yes, I make the trade. And I think, Ryan Day would too, obviously, because he did.
Yep. So now it's up to Frye to kind of do this. Bill, I don't know if you've been very animate about Luke Montgomery. Obviously, that's going to be that's Justin Frye. That's number one. Okay, if
Yes.
I think what Frye gets the orders, it's Luke Montgomery and Peyton Kirkland, and then we'll figure some other stuff out. There's other options out there as well, but I think those are that's kind of the mandate right now. But I don't know if you heard it. Maybe I'm getting bad info. I don't think I am, but people were getting concerned the last 3-4 weeks with Luke Montgomery in Notre Dame. And
Yeah, they're there.
if that
They're
was
definitely
real
there.
or perceived, I think that I'm not saying it was the reason Ryan Day made a move. I think it was maybe one of the final nails in the coffin there, because you let that kid go to Notre Dame, man. So I don't know. I think that helped speed things up here.
Yeah, I can say that let's just move forward to Justin Frye. I can say that Justin Frye has had contact with Luke Montgomery. That's been confirmed to me. It was also confirmed to me that it went very, very, very well. And Ryan Day and Justin Frye are going to be at Luke Montgomery's basketball game this Friday. So this guy's working it, man. So, there's no point going over the stud Luke Montgomery deal. It doesn't do us any good now. He's gone. And I think Justin Frye, when you're looking at first impression, was excellent. Excellent. Great phone call with Luke Montgomery. He's going to head to his basketball game this Friday. That shows effort and willingness and, some gumption to get out there and do the job, which is what Ryan Day is looking for. So I mean, to cut to the chase there, I think Ohio State will get Luke Montgomery. I feel really good about it. And I think Justin Frye will lock that up.
All right. Let's. So we got the two defensive assistants to go through still. Man, I love the Perry Eliano hire. It was not even like on my radar the last few days. I know. I guess he interviewed a week ago. I was told this morning. So it sounds like this all came together pretty quickly last few days. I love it. Bill, I know you have your connections down there in Cincinnati as well. What do
Yeah.
you think of this? And it's safeties right now. Do you think he branches out in other areas, whether that's recruiting territories or helps maybe with the entire secondaries recruiting, and just kind of your take on what he'll bring to the table there?
Yeah, I was shocked that they hired him. I don't know. I just never considered him, even though I've known about the guy because, he's coaching Kobe Bryant down there. I know the Bryant family really well. They love the guy. And I saw, you see what he did with Sauce Gardner, and he's looked at as like an up and coming, rock star kind of guy that's been, stepping up the ladder here. I don't know why I never really associated him with Ohio State. Maybe I should have. It makes all the sense in the world. I mean, everything I've heard about the guy is excellent. And I had known about him before today, but I just never really related him to Ohio State. But I think it's a great hire. Timmy Walton, I knew Tim Walton 100 years ago. I think he was on the Cooper staff, I believe. Haven't really have lost touch with him over the last few years. So we'll see how Timmy adjusts to everything. But the Eliano move, I think, is a total home run, and I think he's going to be a tremendous, tremendous recruiter.
Yeah, it's funny. There was not a lot of smoke there before this happened on him, and it really is funny. Like you kind of said it that like you've known about him forever. You just never kind of put two. And it's like, why didn't we put two and two together? You've got a guy
Right.
90 miles down the road whose second best corner just won the Thorpe. His best corner actually didn't win the Thorpe, and is the one that's gonna be a first top 10, 15 pick. And no one ever seemed to be like, yeah, let's go 90 miles south and hire that guy. But so everyone but Ryan Day, I guess. So Ryan Day doing the tough thinking that none of us could do, I guess. But yeah, I love the hire there. Everything. The book on Tim Walton seems to be a very good teacher, very good fundamentals coach, which is obviously incredibly important, especially with the talented guys they've got. If you can just get the Jordan Hancocks and Ja'Kalen Johnsons of the world to play with good technique, that's going to go a long way. You're going to be just fine there if you can do that. So that's big to me. Seemed, kind of the book on him was, at one point, good recruiter. I think basically, 10, 15 years ago, he kind of was, what Perry Eliano is kind of viewed as now. So it's just kind of getting back in the game. It has changed quite a bit just in the last few years. Now you've got NIL and all this other craziness. So, but there's no reason to believe he can't be an effective recruiter. Here's, I guess, we'll talk about two guys. I'll throw this to you first because you'll have more on this guy than I will, and I'll probably have more on the other guy than you will. And so you were just down there with Cormani Mclean. How does all this impact him? Do you think? Like, I'm sure you've talked to him before the moves were made. Now that you've kind of seen what's happened, this isn't a situation. Do you think this is a situation like, oh, Coombs is gone now? That spring visit might not happen, or kind of what do you think this might do with Mclean?
No, Cormani Mclean's right now, his basic interest in Ohio State is just on the fact that they're Ohio State, and he's excited to get up there and see everything. No coach on that staff really has a relationship with Cormani right now. Cormani is not he doesn't like recruiting. He's the anti-Florida kid. He is not going to like recruiting. He's not going to like the interviews. He did a great interview with me. He and I hit it off really well. Now, I can say that after that camp, we all know Brett Getz, South Florida Express, runs the show there. And Brett is, Brett's not partial to anyone. Brett's a Gator, graduated from Florida. He's sent a million kids to Bama. He sent a bunch of kids to Ohio State. So Brett's very neutral and impartial. And Brett's the one who told me that Ohio State is in tremendous shape with Cormani. And when he gets up there and sees Ohio State for himself in March, more than likely we'll come back in June with Ricky Williams and Geno Smith when they bring their guys up. And there really wasn't a coach that had taken the lead yet for Cormani. So he's high in Ohio State, and that's without, any coach really. Hartline's the only one he's talked to so far. And Brian is not going to be the one that'll do the recruiting. I would think, they'll sick Perry Eliano or Timmy Walton on him now. And I think, the fact that Cormani is so high in Ohio State now without much relationship there, that they're in that one for sure. Now you're going to fight everybody for him. He's going to be in Alabama, Georgia. Everybody in America is going to want a 6'3" corner with hips and speed. So not saying it's going to be easy, but they're in that game for sure. And the position coaches now, the changes can only help Ohio State because nobody really has a relationship with him right now other than Hartline. And Hartline will not eventually be the one that does the recruiting. So, yeah, what happened today will only be a positive for Cormani Mclean in Ohio State.
Well, that obviously sounds very good for Ohio State. This probably won't be as good, but we'll see what happens. There's little doubt in my mind AJ Harris, if he went through with a January decision, was going to go to Ohio State. Obviously, the uncertainty in the secondary, Barnes leaves, but then really the uncertainty around Kerry Coombs is what I think really triggered the delay. He's also got some other guys that have been recruiting him at other schools that are also being linked to other jobs. So there's a lot going on right now with the coaching carousel affecting AJ Harris. The short term with AJ Harris is not going to be good for Ohio State. This is not going to go over well in the short term. But if he's going to wait a few months, you get Walton down there, and this is kind of all very interesting. You've got two coaches now in the secondary, and I can guarantee you the Harris family is going to want to meet and interact with both of them. One of them is Tim Walton is from Columbus, Georgia, which is where AJ Harris has spent he's moved around a bit with the military family, but AJ Harris has essentially grown up in Columbus, Georgia. So there's going to be a natural connection there, some common ground. Walton spent a lot of time in the NFL. The Jalen Ramsey, what do you want to call it? The Jalen Ramsey endorsement is not going to hurt. Jalen Ramsey is on record saying some pretty good things about Tim Walton. And then you've got Perry Eliano, who just had the Thorpe winner, and a second guy who, again, didn't win the Thorpe, but is like certainly going to be a first-round pick in April. So if you can just, it's weird. It went from earlier he commits, the better for Ohio State, to now it's kind of flipped, and it's like, okay, let's give these guys 3 or 4 months. Can they kick this thing to March or April or May? And if they can, I think they can at least stay in it. But short term, don't be surprised if this doesn't help them. But again, we'll see how things go once they're all able to connect, and whether that's getting down there in the spring to watch AJ at his new high school, or whether that's getting AJ to come up at some point this winter or spring for junior day or practice or something. Obviously, that's going to be crucial here. I would expect a new round of visits because of all the coaching shakeup, and the family's just very thorough. They don't love the recruiting process, but they, at the same time, just because they don't love it doesn't mean they're going to just make an uninformed decision. So I think another round of visits is likely. And so if Ohio State can just get one of those and get those guys on him, see what happens.
Hey, Mark, I also wanted to throw in Cedric Hawkins, who's committed to Ohio State, DB. And in the same vein there of Barnes and Combs leaving, does that, do anything with Ced Hawkins? And again, that would be a no. Ced's relationship there is with Tony Alford. And Tony is the one that locked that one down. There was never a need in that recruitment to kind of shift from, hey, we got a running back coach recruiting a safety here. We better get Barnes or Combs in on this one. There was never a need to do that by Ryan Day or Mark D'Antoni, because Tony Alford had done such an amazing job with Ced Hawkins. It was like, man, just let Tony go. And Tony is the one that got that commitment there. So I think, now that you do have Eliano and Walton involved, maybe you can sprinkle one of them in, along with Alford. But, we talked about the coaching changes affecting maybe Cormani Mclean. Absolutely will not affect Cedric Hawkins. Ced was recruited by Alford. Alford's his guy. And I assume Tony will be the one that will, bring one of the two DB coaches into the picture there with Ced Hawkins. But there'll be no decommitment or no problem coming because of these coaching changes with Ced Hawkins.
Yeah, that was the interesting part to me too about the timing of the commitment. And people were asking me like, well, what does that means Combs is staying or that mean, that I'm like, no, I think it just means Tony Alford's a really good recruiter that he was
Yeah.
able to get this kid to commit with like no idea who his future position coaches were going to be.
That was it entirely. Tony Alford entirely.
Oh, all right. Well, a lot there to process. We will see what else happens here. If there's another move, there may be. I still don't know what the special teams Parker Fleming role is going to look like a week from today. We'll keep an eye on that as well. But that's our. I think we've covered everything as far as the coaching changes. So we'll sign off here and appreciate everyone watching, listening. Check us out on BuckeyeScoop.com for more insight on all the off-season coaching moves and recruiting and everything else. Thank you for listening.